Hello. What you're about to witness is a documentary of the making of my short film series, Beast in the Cabin, which follows these hybrid creatures that are half human and half animal as they go on a hunt to kill all of the human race. There's emotion, bloodshed, betrayal, sacrifice, and I hope you like it. Making the first film was always something very special to me because, it was just me, a group of friends, gathering around, just going at it. It was a fun experience, and I'll never forget that experience of making that first film. Hello, I'm Richard Payne, and this is One Last Tale, a Beast in the Cabin documentary. The story was always going to start with being about betrayal. At the start of the franchise, you think that Lloyd and all of these creatures are broken characters, that and you think they're killing for a reason. And it's not until later in the film where you find out that it's not until later in the franchise that you find out that it was Lloyd the entire time who did this. He caused this. He caused this pain for everyone because he forced Tommy to leave them. Tommy didn't want to leave. It was just Lloyd. But that's for later down the line. We're talking about the very beginning right now. The characters were always very interesting to me because they were always going to be hybrid creatures. They were always going to be half human, half animal, all that stuff. It was the design that I was teeter-totting with. And here's a fun fact, and here's one of the exclusives. I don't know if you care to know this, but here's a fun, interesting fact. Throughout all of the entire series, Lloyd only wears gloves for the first film. After the second film, after the first film, he ditches the gloves. And he does bring them back for Beast in the Cabin 5 and 6 when he's wearing the Santa outfit. I could be wrong. I think it's just 1 and 6, but correct me if I'm wrong. And I know I'm the maker. I should know this. But, and then he also does have a kind of a boot change. His boots do change, but that's simply just because I couldn't find the original Lloyd boots. And the mask, all of the animal characters, well, I don't want to say all of the animal characters because some of them didn't really have trains. Like Strix, his mask did not change. Frankie's mask did not change. Ricky's changed a bit. Hairlon did change, but I had a spare Hairlon mask because I knew that I was going to bring him back, so I was like, yeah, let's get a spare, have that ready for when that comes. Danny, he does have a little bit of blood on like the front of his mask, on the front of his face, but Lloyd was definitely the most notable change. He went from this clean look to this more dirty look you see behind me to then this almost rotten look you see in what I like to call his final form. It's this rotten down, dirty, and the reason why that is because, he was dead for 2 years. I wanted to give him like this almost decrepit, deceased look to him. And that was very interesting to me. Because I wanted to make him look more menacing, more terrifying. And I think the final form look is my favorite look of Lloyd. And yeah, it was great. The plot was always gonna, I was teeter-tottering because I had written these into books before I made them into films. And I don't think you're ever gonna get to see those books. Sorry. But just because I'm not a fan of the books and how they were written, and so I don't want to release them. I wrote those in 2019. The 2019 me was not a great writer. But I was gonna take some aspects from the books I had written. And here's a fun fact. So, at the end of Beast in the Cabin, or the first film, let me word that right. At the end of the first film, Lloyd slits the woman's throat, and he's like, "You left," to Tommy and all that. And then, it says Lloyd will return, and then you get to Beast in the Cabin 2, and Tommy is not there. I made it to where Tommy is killed off, but off screen. And that was always something I was never going to show. Because when the actor for Tommy couldn't do Beast in the Cabin 2, I was like, well, I don't want to recast, at least not yet. And I was thinking, and I remembered, hey, I have this character, Allison, that I could use. Now in the books, she gets introduced in Beast in the Cabin 4. So way later. And so I was like, you know what, that'd be fun. And so I was looking around asking people, asking left and right, if this person wanted to play the role, that person wanted to play the role, and people just kept saying no. And so eventually, I was originally going to cancel the film because people kept declining and not wanting to do it. And then I had sent a Instagram DM to my friend Riley, and she agreed to do the role. And so her and I filmed Beast in the Cabin 2, and I was looking at that film, and I was like, hey, she did a great job with that. Why don't I bring her back for Beast in the Cabin 3? And so she said yes to Beast in the Cabin 3 and 4. And so, and that kind of bettered our friendship. And then, we just became real good friends over that period. And so Allison was originally going to be introduced later on in the series, but since the actor of Tommy left the project, I had to change things around. So there's a little fun fact for you. And in the original script for Beast in the Cabin 4, Lloyd and Allison both died. They were originally going to be like the big, enemies of the, and they, to some extent, depending on who you ask, and different people have their different opinions on the series. This is just me too, but I think Allison and Lloyd's rivalry is probably my favorite. And I think it's definitely Lloyd's favorite too, because in Beast in the Cabin 8, he mocks Danny. He's like, your sister was a much stronger opponent than you ever were. And so, it was Allison and Lloyd's rivalry was always the biggest one, I think it's the one most people think of when they want to think about a rivalry in my series. It's definitely going to be those two. Obviously, you have Danny and Lloyd, but I don't think anything will be as big as, Lloyd and Allison's, big, epic fights that we filmed. Now it's time to dive into the films one by one, and I'm going to tell you interesting facts about them and the making of about each scene. Let's start from the beginning. With the first film, you open up with Tommy, Lloyd, Frankie in the woods. And it does really set up the first film, and really does set up this big universe and this big epic. It is the start of this big epic series. And the fun thing about this opening scene is when we were filming it, my two friends, Mark and Harrison, Mark who plays Tommy and Harrison who plays Frankie, when we were filming that scene, there's a big giant wood area, woods in my yard, in my backyard. We filmed this in my backyard. And that's how it is with most of the films of the series, so no surprise there. But we had filmed this in a big wooded area, and there's all branches, and they're all just poking us, being, little pricks, I guess you could say. Little pun there. And so they were all being like the branches. They were all poking us in our eyes and all that stuff. And so I go back to my shop and get branch cutters and like tree cut and like ply and whatever. And so we're using that. And meanwhile, Harrison, who plays Frankie, and it's funny because in the scene he's holding the crowbar and whatnot. So while we're over here using our cutters or the plow, whatever, he's over here whacking the branches with a crowbar over here like, and me and Mark, we're over here just looking at him and we're like, my God, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm taking the branches down. And we're like, with a crowbar? And so, yeah, that was real funny behind the scenes. And so just the scene, you know, you get the build up, you get the first like notes with all that and like the backstory and whatnot. I'm going to be real here. This is my bad. I totally forgot about Charlie the Owl until I revisited the series, or revisited this first film a few days ago for the first time in 2 years. Actually 3 years. But yeah, that's my bad. But yeah, it was a really big fun opening scene to shoot. A huge pain at the start because the branches in our eyes and stuff like that. But it was just a real good first scene, and I loved shooting that scene. This scene right behind me is a really awesome sequence. I mean, it's a short sequence. It's where Lloyd and Frankie both like take this buzzsaw and just rim it. And so the actress right there is actually my neighbor, Haley, and she did a good job with the scene. It was a quick, easy done scene. Not really too much to say about this sequence, other than it was cool to shoot. It's hard to say because it was real quick, easy. Not much time was spent on it. Yeah. Now this scene and this whole ending sequence, the girl right there, one of my old neighbors, Malia, and she collaborated with me on Beast in the Cabin 1 and 2, and she did a good job with her scenes, especially this scream that she does in this scene right here where she notices Lloyd behind her, and yeah, she did a good job with that. I don't remember there being any incidents in this sequence. Now, the ending sequence with, Tommy stabbing Frankie with the crowbar and Lloyd slitting Malia's character's throat and all that, and then it ends. Now, here's a fun fact about that scene. So when we had filmed that scene, when Tommy is stabbing Frankie with the crowbar and all that stuff, we did not know this, but he accidentally, Mark, like I said, the actor who plays Tommy, he accidentally hit Harrison, who plays Frankie. He accidentally hit him with the crowbar. And this is a real crowbar, by the way, and accidentally hit him. But luckily, no injuries, nothing. And after we said cut, he just lets out a tiny owl. And yeah, that was it. And that's the gist of Beast in the Cabin 1 for you. This is basic. Start. Get the story, started and ready to go, and then boom. Yeah, let's move on to the sequel. With Beast in the Cabin 2, it picks up a day after part 1. And for me, I think this one was my favorite one to shoot. Now, obviously, I have different opinions on what my favorite scenes are, what my favorite fights are, and whatnot. But I think this one, in all, was my favorite one to shoot because, I don't know, it was, I think the one I collaborated with most people on. Starting with this scene, it's a pretty grisly scene. It features my good friend, my good childhood friend, Braggy Wainwright. And so he plays this character right behind me that gets stabbed in the neck and then gets his eyes ripped out and his throat slit and all that. And so he lets out this great scream. I love it. and it sounds funny, but I just thought it worked so perfectly. And big shout out to him. He's great. I'd love to work with him on other films. But if you watch the film, you'll know what Scream I'm talking about. I wouldn't even count it a Scream. It was just so hilarious, and I watched it. I wanted to keep it in. It was so funny. And then you get the scene where he kills Harrison's character, not Frankie, but Harrison comes back to play a citizen, and he like gets his arm cut and then like gets his throat cut again, like Raggy's character, and then Lloyd walks off, and that was also lots of fun to film. There's a reason why you get a close up on Lloyd's face when he's cutting his throat is because I had to hide out Harrison's character, Harrison, from laughing because he was laughing while we were shooting that. And so I had to like zoom in on Lloyd's face so you wouldn't catch him laughing. And yeah, that scene was a lot of fun to film. This scene right here, what I like to call the pig head kill, features me as Lloyd, and my mother, who, as many would call my Stan Lee of my films. I try to include her in every single thing I did. The only one I can really think of, before she unfortunately passed away, the only one I can think of was she wasn't in the first film, the first Beast in the Cabin film. Every other film, she's made an appearance as a kill scene. And yes, my mother, who, man, she loved doing these kills. She loved doing these, so she loved getting bloody and stuff like that. And I would not be into horror if it wasn't for her. So I owe that to her. I owe that to her. I owe my filming to her. And so I owe everything to her. But so she was just a complete delight to work with in all the films that we did. And especially this one, because, she opens the door, she gets the package, she opens it, it's a decapitated pig's head with a hook in it, and she's freaking out, she falls, and then you get Lloyd coming in with the surgical hammer, and then just goes crazy on her. And then, yeah, it was just lots of fun to film. It was awesome. Now, the introduction scene to one of the most important characters of the series. Danny, and this is actually his only evil scene. No, never mind. He has one in part 3. This is his only evil kill. Yeah, this is his only besides Lloyd, this is his only kill. And because, I kind of wanted to tease that he would turn good, and by only giving him one kill, and so. This scene was lots of fun. I got to film this with my neighbor Mike. Real, just awesome dude. He was he's such a down to earth guy. He is such a great guy. And to work with him was awesome. We got up at, I want to say 6 in the morning to shoot this scene. And it was lots of fun. Danny ripping into his arm and all that. That was lots of fun to film. The buzzsaw scene in the first film, quick and easy. Just kind of show who this character was and stuff like that. So yeah. Now I don't like talking about this scene all that much because it's one of the scenes I regret doing, and it's why I retconned it, where Ricky turns good. Well, for the first time, I guess. And then Danny comes in and stabs him. I guess technically, if you want to be technical about it, this is Danny's second kill because I was really going to kill off Ricky here, but I'm like, no, I'm going to bring him back. So I just retconned this scene. So do what you want with the scene, ignore it, think about it, all that stuff. But for me, and for canon reasons, it's retcon. Moving on. This scene right here, the garage kill, was at the time my most vicious kill. And Keep in mind, I did not have lots of blood and all that stuff, and so I was working with what I had. You know, a fake eyeball, a few makeup pieces and stuff like that. But it's one of the few scenes where my dad's in, because there's a reason I don't have my dad in a lot of films, because every time I kill him, or most of the time I kill him, he is always smiling when he dies. So yeah, great job, Dad. And so, yeah, it was a lot of fun to film this scene. You know, very, like I said, at the time, it was my most vicious kill. And so it was lots of fun to film. Great stuff. One of the few times my dad did not smile when he died. So that was awesome. Really showed Lloyd's viciousness. Now this scene right here, this scene was the hardest scene I have ever had to shoot, at least for this, I had ever had to shoot for this film. Because so there's in the scene where the two girls wrap my legs around in the chain. Whenever they would pull on the chain, it would always rip off. So we had to shoot the scene over and over and over again, get it just right. And so it was very difficult to see him, but it was fun. It was lots of fun. Originally the scene I meant to have it be like 6 people, but I had to work with 3. So that was fun. It was still fun. It was still lots of fun to shoot. It really showed, like, you know, Lloyd's like brute strength. They're taking on, it's a 1v3 right here. And you know, he started off weak. He's like, and then bam, grabs the bat out of his back and then just goes to town on them. It was real fun, real awesome to shoot. Shout out to all 3 of these great ladies right here for working on the film with me and doing that. So that was fun. Now for the most important scene of the entire film, Lloyd and Allison's first encounter. And like I said at the start of this documentary, I was about to scrap this film if it wasn't for Riley agreeing to do the film. Because I was originally starting to run out of ideas. And, you know, people kept declining the film. And then I DM'd Riley on Instagram. She agreed to it. And then that brought it back. And then we just continued. And it was lots of fun to film. We shot it on a Saturday afternoon at my high school. And we had lots of fun to film. It was in an auditorium, and it was lots of fun to film. You know, these characters. It was their first encounter, and like I said, the two. This is gonna be an argument, but the 2 biggest rivals in the series, the entire series. That's just me. But yeah, it was lots of fun to film. You know, kind of starting and making our friendship better. So that was nice. Yeah, you know, she did such a good job with this film. You know, I had to bring her back for Beast in the Cabin 3 and 4. And it was just a real blast to work with her. And I could go on and on about how much I value her as a friend and a great collaborator and such a good friend. It still is, and I'm very excited to collaborate with her again on The Bone Man. So yeah, she's great. But yeah, this scene was lots of fun to film. Sets up a crazier storyline. But yeah, it was lots of fun. Then you also get the, I guess, second most important scene of the film, where Lloyd finds out that Allison, one, is not only alive, but is the daughter of Tommy. And that's where he gets, like, he sends Danny out to get him, or get her. And Lloyd is like, there's no negotiating. I'm not negotiating with the daughter of my most hated rival. And this is where, like, he kind of starts getting obsessed with killing her. Because I said this a long time ago, but if Allison was not related to Tommy, Lloyd would not care. Lloyd would not be hunting her and tracking her down. But since Allison is related to Lloyd, he kind of is became so obsessed and wanted her dead. And so yeah, it was lots of fun getting to do this scene and kind of build up, and Allison turned to the camera and be like, "I'm coming for you, Lloyd." And then Lloyd is like, and Danny is like, "She knows of our location." Now here's a fun fact, and I know this is kind of spoiling it because we're all based in the Kappa 2, but Danny was the one who revealed the location to Allison because he was not always up for the killing game, and so yeah, he was only killing because Lloyd told him to, and so yeah, there was always kind of a connection between Danny and Allison there. Yeah, just a real cool ending, real fun stuff to do, and yeah, awesome stuff. The interesting part about this scene right here, the opening to Beast in the Cabin 3, is it's the first scene where someone is actually like physically injuring Lloyd. My mom's character stabs him in the eye, and then he has to like rip out her eye and replace his old. And it was really, really cool to see that because it was like the first time anyone had ever like fully injured him. And it was lots of fun to film, Lloyd killing someone with a candy cane. That was a fun little concept I had for a while, and it was fun to execute. Yeah, it was lots of fun to film this opening. Fun fact about this scene, this was the first time I had ever used blood on Lloyd's mask. And this is something I regret some days, yes, because I completely ruined that mask because of it. But some days, no, I think it worked out for the better. Like I said, I prefer his final form. I do love this. I do love the original look, though. There's something awesome about the original look. But yeah, this scene was a lot of fun to film. This is the first time I ever got to be a kill. So yes, not only do I play Lloyd in this scene, but I also play the guy who gets killed. And it was a lot of fun getting bloody, getting all that blood on my face, getting all that. That was awesome. That was incredible. It was just an awesome scene, yeah. And it was it was tricky to film at first because, I'm playing the killer and I'm playing the killie. Let's call it that. And yeah, it was lots of fun to film. Oh yeah, no, this scene, if I could go back and refilm a scene, this would be it. Because, oh my gosh, this scene was so a nightmare to edit. Because when we were filming, me and Harrison, I brought back Frankie, and this is where Frankie reveals that he knew about Allison all along, and so Lloyd feels betrayed and kills him. And in this scene, not in this shot, but you do see like the table in the back and all that, like the filming equipment and stuff in the back. And I wish I could go back and undo that. And also the worst and the obvious thing, the wind. The wind was terrible that day. And oh my gosh, it was just a total nightmare. And I hate this mask. I hate this mask with a passion. I hate this Spare Lloyd mask that I have. Because it looks nothing like what I ordered when we ordered it. It was just, yeah. But it is cool, I'm glad I do have it because, it gives me opportunity to film like flashback scenes if I wanted to do like a prequel. And that's still a thing I'm debating on. And I would definitely not do it like anytime soon. But yeah, it's something. I thought Harrison did a great job in the scene. Do not get me wrong, not complaining about him. He did great. He was, I think, the best part of this scene and the redeeming quality of this scene. He did great. And also just shows just how ruthless Lloyd can be. If you lie to him, you're getting dead. And yeah, it was just a lot of fun for me and him to collaborate again. Not this scene. This scene was a nightmare. No. Just fun times. This scene was also the first scene I used blood on Ricky's mask too, and also where I brought him back from that terrible scene that I regret doing in Beast in the Cabin 2. But also, I get to be another kill. I get to be 2 kills in this movie. And I get to get my eye ripped out. Yay! And my leg ripped off. So that's nice. And yeah, it was lots of fun to film. Like I said, I'm playing Frankie here, and the guy who gets killed. So yeah, it's a lot of fun to play different characters, and I get to talk to myself. That's really fun. And yeah, it was awesome. A lot of real fun scene to film. I'm trying to think, were there any issues with filming the scene? I don't think there were any issues, just things I would think. There are definitely things I would do differently about the scene. And certainly, I've said this before, this is one of my least favorite films of the series, but it's funny because it has some of my favorites. Like the next scene I'm about to get to is is one of my top favorite scenes. I don't want to say it's my favorite because it changes a lot, but it's one of my favorite scenes I've ever shot in my entire career of doing this for 6 years. And it's the big fight, which let's talk about that now. Now, what you're seeing is not a error in the projector. This is actually how the scene was. And it's one thing I wish I could go back and edit. And I don't know why it was like this too. Because when I edited it, it was perfectly fine. And I don't know why it's so small. But yeah, this is my favorite scene in the entire film. One of my all-time favorite scenes that I've ever shot. It's with Lloyd and Allison having their big fight in the hallway. And they're just going at it. They're throwing each other at lockers on the ground. Just insane. Me and Riley had a lot of fun shooting this scene. It was just brutal, crazy, awesome. And I love this shot right here where Lloyd is like, it starts off with his face blurry, and then it unblurries, and like he's looking back, he's like, I'm wondering when you'd show up. And then now it's like, it ends with you and me. And so me and Riley had a lot of fun filming the scene. And also, this scene, at first, was originally going to be the end of the series, Lloyd would have turned good, and then in another version of the script, it would have continued from there, and Lloyd would have helped Allison fight a darker villain. But I'm like, no, let's keep Lloyd evil. Let's just say that this is part of his plan, and like he wants to study her, get close to her, study her weaknesses, study her strengths, and use them against her. And that's what we find out in Beast in the Cabin 4. But this scene was a lot of fun to film. Like I said, we filmed this. Well, I don't want to say like we said, because we filmed this differently. We filmed this in March of 2024, and it was lots of fun to film. We had filmed this, I think, a Sunday or Saturday, and yeah, it was lots of fun. Really, really cool stuff. Now, Beast of the Cabin 4, I was gearing up to be like the bloodiest, epic conclusion to the storyline with Allison and Lloyd. Because like I said earlier, this was originally going to kill off both their characters, So I'll talk about this later. And so where Lloyd is like holding the knife, after that he like was going to pass out and die right there with Allison. So a little fun fact there. I'll talk more about that when we get to that scene. But starting off with the opening, it was lots of fun to film. I definitely took a lot of inspiration from Terrifier 2 with the shop scene with Art. I definitely took a lot of inspiration from that. And this scene also shows like Lloyd has a funny side to him, at least early on in the film. I think this is one of the few moments you get to see funny Lloyd. Because I wanted to keep Lloyd more serious rather than funny. He'll still have those funny quirks, whatever, and he'll still have those funny quirks. But I wanted to keep him more grounded, more serious than funny. But yeah, this scene was a lot of fun to film. I got to be, like I said, a Lloyd, but I also got to be the guy who gets killed, and I get to stab in the neck and get a knife in my eye and all that. That was fun. And then Lloyd honks the horn, and then he walks off, and you get this awesome, lovely shot of the American flag and the sunset and Lloyd, and like he has the blood on his mouth, and he's like just looking around. I love that shot. Now this scene is very interesting, and another one that I'm not a big fan of because the wind is not our friend. And so in this scene, you have Lloyd, Danny, and Ricky, meeting up, and then Ricky's like, "Where have you been?" to Danny, and Danny's like, "I've been planning, you idiot." And it kind of hints that Danny and Ricky, haven't always liked each other, and I've said that before. They hated each other at the beginning. Ricky hated Danny because he thought too hard about things, and then Danny hated Ricky because Ricky was too arrogant. And I mean, he is correct on that. Ricky was a little arrogant in the earlier films, which I'll touch up on that in a minute. But touching on this is one of the darker scenes you get with Danny. He's the one that's putting the ideas in Lloyd's head that, like, we need to strike now, the human race now. So, like, Lloyd was right in Beast of the Cabin 8 when, like, hey, there's always a darkness in you. And so, yeah, that kind of shows here. But also, it's really fun to see. Lloyd is over here, like, he's not playing around anymore. He got close to Allison so he could study her weaknesses and strengths, then bam, kills her. This scene was real easy to film. It was me and my dad and me. Lloyd picks up like the piece of wood and just hits him with it, and then yeah, that's pretty simple. No issues there. I don't know why I decided to make him have like little flimsy arms and stuff like that. I don't know why I decided to do that, but yeah, it was just something I did. I don't know why. It's just random, just an accident. I don't know. Then you have this scene with Ricky killing my mom in this fourth film, and he really is like all bloodied up, and I love that. And that's where you start getting like the dirty, like raw, crazy, vicious Ricky that I love so much. And like he has the blood on his fingers and like the blood dripping down his face and like all that. That's real cool to see. And yeah, it was lots of fun to film. I remember my neighbors when we were filming, they were over here watching us and they were like, "Hi," and then as soon as I'm done killing her, we're like cut, and we're like, and I'm wearing the Ricky mask and I'm all drenched in blood and I'm like, "Hi," and it was just lots of fun. But yeah, this scene was real cool to film. Then you get the limb kill where obviously you can tell it's a dummy. Yes, I know. But it was also really, really bloody and it was fun, but it was a nightmare, total nightmare to clean up. Because, that was the most, if I'm being honest, I think that's the most blood I've ever used in a film. Like, that's the bloodiest sequence I've ever filmed. And like the entire mannequin was just ruined after that, drenched in blood everywhere. Like the eye was stabbed out, everything was bloody, cut in half, arms ripped off, all that. And it really just showed like Lloyd's brutalness and like that darker side taking over and like taking over the, like in that broken side kind of leaving him, and that like darkness fully like embracing and overcoming the light for Lloyd. Then you get one of the more interesting scenes where Ricky actually encounters Allison, and Lloyd gave explicit orders not to injure Allison whatsoever. And since, like I said, Ricky is an arrogant little prick, he stabs Allison right before she stabs him, and then he goes to Lloyd, and then Danny is like, "What happened to you?" And then Lloyd's like, "I told you not to injure her." And like, he's like, "Does that look unharmed to you?" And then he cuts Ricky's throat, like showing Danny a message of like, "Hey, this is what happens when you disobey my orders. Do not ever do that again, or you're going to end up like Ricky." And this is kind of like where Danny kind of gets the like, this man's gone too far. He's became too obsessed, and just that's kind of Danny's turning point. He may not like Ricky, but he doesn't hate him. He doesn't want him dead. Yeah. Then you get the big final showdown between Lloyd and Allison. And so then they're fighting, and Riley and I shot this in my backyard, and we had a lot of fun filming this. This big, epic final showdown. Knives, scythes, and like sickles and all that, and like, okay. So here's a fun fact about this scene. So when Allison stabs Lloyd in the eye with the scythe or sickle, whatever you want to call it, Lloyd does die there. He does get sent to the afterlife, and there's a quick moment of happiness, and like Allison's like, goodbye, Lloyd, and so Lloyd. But however, they say it's not your. They're like, it's not your time, and that's how he's able to come back and stab Allison right in the chest. And he's like, you're dying before I do, and then that right there, after he stabs her, he was gonna pass out and then die right again. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And like, yeah, it was real fun getting to shoot this. This is the last Beast in the Cabin film we ever shot together. Not the last film we ever shot together, because we did Rebirth and Pain, the movie. But yeah, this was a lot of fun to film, the final showdown between these two characters that that hated each other since Beast in the Cabin 2, and then have been at each other's throats since then. And yeah, it was lots of fun to film. And there were even times in writing the final film where I wanted to bring Allison back and have them do like a one big epic, crazy, bloody, brutal fight scene. But I'm like, no, that would ruin her character death, and then that would ruin Danny's like heroic turn. Then you get one of the most important scenes of the entire series, where Lloyd goes from a broken character to just a pure evil character. After he kills Allison, he goes insane. And I like this scene because, Allison and Lloyd are like, they're like Batman and Joker. One can't exist without the other. And so that's why Lloyd goes insane, because he has no one to kind of banter with and kind of like fight. And so he like loses his mind because he has no one left to, he thinks like no one else will stand in his way, because I've said this before, that Lloyd was 100% afraid of Allison. Like, he saw what she could do, and he saw like that she was the first person to put up a fight, and like it was just crazy. And so yeah, Lloyd goes insane here in pure evil. And then you get the end credit scene where Strix appears for the first time, and like you think he's working with Lloyd, but then you get in part 5 where like, no, he's actually Danny's friend, and Danny called upon him to help get him out of the situation. But which brings us to Beast in the Cabin 5. Beast in the Cabin 5, it picks immediately after where part 4 leaves off, kind of. And so it opens up with Lloyd killing my dad, who was playing Santa. I guess a mole Santa. And so, I don't know, if you want to have Lloyd killing the real Santa Claus as canon, you can have that. But, so Lloyd kills and like takes the Santa outfit, and I thought that was like comedic, for comedic purposes, funny, because this and Beast in the Cabin 6 are Christmas horror films, and so it was just lots of fun to film that opening scene. And then you get the scene with Strix and Danny, where they're talking about like what do they do next, it's kind of the start of Danny's hero journey. With Danny becoming a hero, I knew that he would be the next big character to like fight Lloyd. He'd be the new Allison, if you will. I knew that he would be related to Allison's character in some way, they'd be siblings, and to kind of like tie into that original aspect. And that's how it is in the books too. Danny is related to Allison in the books. And in the books, Lloyd is actually related to Allison. And they're brother and sister, and they fight to the death. But I'm like, no, I don't want to bring that aspect into the film. And I just want to have Danny and Allison be siblings. And so, yeah. But although they don't... Well, actually, no. Lloyd knew this. Lloyd knew this when he met Allison. He had a feeling that something was up with Danny, because after that, Danny started acting strange, so he had a feeling that something was up. And so, with that being said, Danny being a hero was always something I was gonna do, if given like the opportunity to. And this was a great, I think, stepping point with Danny. And yeah, it was like it's me playing both characters, me playing Strix, me playing Danny. Now this scene, fun fact about this scene, when me and my mom were filming this scene, we were originally gonna make it, so in Beast of the Cabin 6, there's essentially this scene, but like 6 minutes longer and done way better. However, and that's what this scene was originally going to be. However, Mother Nature had other plans, and so rain happened, so we had to rush back inside, and like we couldn't like film it, and it just ruined it. But it was still a fun scene. I call it the prototype kill because it was, like I said, it was originally going to be what Beast in the Cabin 6 chainsaw kill is. This is the prototype, essentially, the blueprint. And so I love the scene. My mom did not care whatsoever if her Elton John shirt got bloody. She was like ready to go. And yeah, this scene was fun to film, although it only lasted about a minute, but yeah. And then you get the introduction to Herlon, which Herlon is a vital character in these next couple of films. You kind of think he's like an insane, psychotic psychopath, which, and so he is. In Beast in the Cabin 5 and 6, and to some extent 7, dear Lord, there's going to be some person in the comment that comments the stupid 6-7 joke. But, and this, there's a kind of tease that Herlon and Strix kind of have a rivalry together, but because I was really going to make that be like the new Danny and versus Ricky rivalry, but I'm like, no, we've already had that. I don't want to repeat what I've already done. And so I kind of like cut that. And yeah, it was just a lot of fun. And then you get that ending scene where like Lloyd sends Herlon out to find Danny, and Danny's disappeared. And then Lloyd realizes that Strix had something to do with it. And then like Lloyd pulls out the knife and he's like, let's have a little talk. And then it cuts to that ending where Danny comes back and like Lloyd's waiting for him and is like, you've haunted me for years. And that kind of foreshadows what happens later in the series with Beast in the Cabin 8. And then Lloyd stabs Danny, and you don't know if he's gonna make it. You don't know if he's gonna die. And so that's kind of like the cliffhanger. And yeah, that was very fun. So now Beast in the Cabin 6, one of the most important films of the entire series, and was originally going to be, when I made the film originally, it was originally going to be the end, because, at the end of the film, spoilers, Lloyd gets his head chopped off, Herlon seemingly gets killed, and there's not really much I can do. And then I thought of more ways to do it with Beast in the Cabin 7 and 8, and so yeah, but we'll get onto those later. Starting with the opening for Beast in the Cabin 6, picking up immediately where it left off, and Danny awakening up, and him picking up the sword, which becomes a crucial part of these next few films. And it was definitely Danny's signature weapon. And he vows to kill Lloyd and Herlon. And yeah, it was just really, really cool to see. And then it takes a 5-year time jump. Then you get this awesome scene where I play 4 characters in this scene. I play 4 characters. I play 2 people that get killed, and I play Lloyd and Herlon. And so this also was really bloody because, I got fake blood all in my mouth and fake blood in my teeth and all that. And, I'm over here like, and, all that. And then, and then another character, so Lloyd will, off screen, throws, paint all over this guy's face. And that's, to explain why he has, the dummy white head. It's all, foam. It's a foam head. And so I just had to find a reason to, explain why he has that all of a sudden white head. And it's I just had, like I said, Lloyd threw paint on him or something. But you can use your own like imagination to like come up with whatever he did. Yeah, it was a very intense scene to film. Lloyd and Harlan at that point had kind of vanished. I never seen them for years, for 5 years, ever since Lloyd stabbed Danny. No one ever saw him. Yeah. But yeah, it was lots of fun to film that scene. Then you get the scene with Harlan in the chair talking about how like the world needs to experience true pain, and then you get like Lloyd with the off-screen kills and like using his spiked bat from Beast in the Cabin 2 and like just going crazy on people, and it's off-screen, and then Lloyd turns to the camera, kind of breaking the fourth wall, and he's like, I thought that was funny, making him break the fourth wall. I thought that was a real hoot. And it was something I had never done before, and that's something I had thought about doing for this film. So in the scene that I talked about doing for the last film, when Lloyd's like telling Danny like your sister was a much stronger opponent than you ever were, Lloyd was originally going to turn to the camera and be like, "You hear that, Beast in the Cabin fans? That's who Lloyd's strongest opponent was." But I'm like, he was like, "That's who my strongest opponent was." And yeah, it was just crazy. Then you get the scene with like Danny and Strix, and like Strix trying to warn Danny, but Danny's not wanting to listen. And originally I was going to kill off Strix here, but I'm like, no, I want to bring him back. And like more people wanted to see more of him. So I'm like, I'm going to bring him back. And so, yeah, I think bringing him back was definitely a smart decision on my part. And yeah, it was. And I really loved getting to see his character growth throughout Beast in the Cabin 4 through 8. But I'll get onto that later. But yeah, and then you get the scene where Danny and Lloyd are having a one-on-one conversation, and you kind of get the more negotiating side to Lloyd. He almost, at first, before he gets his head chopped off, he has a soft spot for Danny. And yes, I will confirm that he did before he got his head chopped off. He had a soft spot for Danny. He thought of Danny as like a brother. Lloyd kind of negotiates with Danny. He's like, "Hey, join me together. You and I can reshape the world." And he's over here talking about how like humans are like so divisive about opinions and like are so at each other's throats, whether it's like elections, wars, whatever. And like it's that intelligence that Lloyd has, because before the events of the entire series, Lloyd studied humans. He watched them. Not to mention, he was once a human at one point. All of these characters really were. They were what nobody knows how they turned into what they are, and I'm never gonna explain how. For as long as I'm alive, I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you right now, I'm never gonna explain how they became the way they are. You just got to know that they were once humans at one point. Now they're not. But yeah, it was definitely a powerful scene, and like really showing like the soft spot Lloyd has for Danny. Oh my goodness! Now this scene was the most crazy kill me and my mom ever shot, but it was a nightmare to clean up. The infamous 5-minute long chainsaw scene where Lloyd basically just goes to town. Now, fun fact, when we filmed this scene, I accidentally got fake blood all over the Santa suit. And so when I washed it, it turned the suit pink. And so this was a day before Halloween, and I was going as Santa Art to celebrate Terrifier 3 to hand out candy. And that's what, the YouTube video I have on my YouTube earlier. And it's still there, but you can go check it out if you want to. But it ruined it, so I had to use a animatronic Santa suit for that. But I'll talk about that. I can talk about that any other time. But yeah, lots of fun to film. This was unfortunately the last film me and my mom ever did together, and she was just amazing. She was so gracious enough to do these films with me, and she had such a blast doing these films with me, and I had a blast doing these films with her, and it's definitely something I'll remember forever and something I will remember and love doing with her. And it was just a blast. You get the scene where Hairlon kills the guy, and then Danny and Hairlon have a little encounter, and Hairlon tricks Danny into thinking that he killed Strix, and then Danny drives the sword into Hairlon's ear, supposedly killing him. Now, like I said, this was originally going to be the end, so like Hairlon was going to die here, but then I brought him back and beats the Cabin 7. And then you get the biggest battle of this era before Beast in the Cabin 8. You got Lloyd and Danny, chainsaw versus sword, which I did take inspiration from Terrifier 3. They're fighting. Danny and Lloyd going at it, brutal battle, awesomeness. Danny is injuring Lloyd left and right, and Lloyd feels fear right now because like he's actually getting like severely wounded, throat cut, stabbed in the back, and then he gets his head chopped off, and that was originally going to be his end, and that's the final shot of this film is his head right here, and yeah, it was such a cool film to shoot, such an awesome way, and definitely if you want to call this the end, you can call it the end. You don't have to consider the other films canon. You can if you want to, but I consider the other films canon. You can if you want to. It just depends on your taste. But yeah, it was awesome to shoot. Hard to film the decapitation scene. But yeah, really, really cool stuff. Now with Beast in the Cabin 7, I wanted to divide into more than just one movie to kind of give people. And it was a very interesting film because it's the first film with a human villain to it, with Dr. Payne. And also you bring Hairlon back. In this film, you get to explore more with Danny and Strix, and I love that dynamic between the two, and I'm really glad I did that. And Danny is trying to protect Strix, kind of like being like an older brother to him of sorts. And Strix is like, leave me out of this, please. I've had enough fighting in my time. And yeah, it was awesome. Then you get, I think, my favorite scene of the entire film out of both parts. Hairlon and Danny's scene in where Hairlon's being chained up, and I love these shots of Hairlon promising that he'll kill Strix. And yeah, it's just real cool. And Hairlon's like, my wound healed up like a charm. Don't worry about that. I'm just going to kill you and your friend. Then you get Dr. Payne, which, like I said, is the first human villain of, I guess depending on your point of view. If you're the animals, then you'll think that all the humans are the villains. But Dr. Payne's a very interesting character because he tried to turn himself into one of these hybrid creatures but failed and somehow got a hook hand. You don't know how. But he's also Hairlon's father. And that was a cool twist in part 2 of the 7th film. He's a very sinister character. And in part 2, you find out that he is the father of Hairlon. And at the end of part 2, he is going to kill Hairlon. He's willing to sacrifice his own son, but then Hairlon gets saved by Danny and then stabs him in the mouth and then kills him. And then Danny and Hairlon kind of go their separate ways, and then Hairlon goes with Strix. And then Danny gets the flashbacks to, or gets visions of the cloaked gators that we see in part 8, that are just absolute units. And yeah, Beast in the Cabin 7 both parts were lots of fun to film. I think, were there any challenges? The only challenges was when the chained up scenes, because those chains were so dirty, they would get the white outfit that Hairlon had, get it all dirty and messed up, and that was really only difficult. But anything else, Beast in the Cabin 7 was a lot of fun to film. It was certainly different, Lloyd wasn't in the film, and it was kind of something new I wanted to try out. Lloyd has been the main threat since the very beginning, and I want to try out something new. And yeah, I think people really liked that. Now with Beast in the Cabin 8, having this be the last film, I knew I had to go out big. I knew I wasn't going to do it one movie, It was going to be divided into more than one part. I knew 2 would be too small. I knew 5 and 4 would be too big. So 3 was just the right amount. And it did give me the perfect space. Part 1, it opens with Ricky in the afterlife, and he finds Lloyd, and he thinks, Allison sent him to the afterlife because Ricky has been dead for a long time, and he doesn't know that Danny turned good, and so Lloyd kind of like gives him visions and kind of like gives him a recap. And so yeah, and then this is where we find out that Lloyd has powers and like and he has an army of alligators that he sends out to get Danny, and Lloyd kind of takes a backseat in Beast in the Cabin 8 Part 1 and 2 because he kind of sends the alligators to do most of the dirty work for him, and his main goal is to hurt Danny. He doesn't want to kill him. He wants to hurt him, and then he'll kill him. Like, he wants to kill all his friends and make him suffer for what he did. This is where you get the awesome dirty look, and I love it so much because like the side of his face is all damaged. And this film is the part 1 is very crazy. Not to mention you get a bunch of character interactions. You get Hairlawn, Danny, Strix, Ricky, all interacting. And then at first, Hairlawn is kind of being a hypocrite. He's like, Danny, we shouldn't trust Ricky. He tried to kill you at one point. That's Hairlawn being a hypocrite, especially because Hairlawn tried to kill Danny. This is the last film, and so I thought that was gonna be real funny, having Hairlawn be such a hypocrite. But then, it's really a beautiful journey because at the end of this part, Hairlawn and Danny, they make up and they become friends, and then you get that crazy gut punching scene where Lloyd and Danny, meet for the first time in a long time, and then like Lloyd uses his new powers and makes Hairlawn snap his own neck in front of Danny, and then Danny gets shown the truth that Lloyd was behind everything since the beginning. He made Tommy leave. Tommy didn't want to leave. Lloyd threatened to kill his family if he didn't leave. And so Lloyd did this just so he could get Tommy and just so he can get Danny to be on his side. Because Lloyd knew that Danny and his family would always be his end. He said that in part 2. And yeah, part 1 was crazy. And then part 2 picks up immediately after part 1 left off, and Danny gets essentially his powers, but he doesn't know it yet. And so Lloyd made the mistake of giving him powers, and Lloyd didn't even realize this either. And so once again, he sends his gators to do all the work, but this is where you get all the juicy stuff, the awesome stuff. Strix enters Lloyd's mind and like takes him back to where he got his head chopped off. And then we get to see for the first time ever human Lloyd. And like Lloyd is afraid here. Like he is confused. He does not know what's happening. And like it's just a lot of craziness. And then like Lloyd realized, okay, we gotta take out Strix next. He's the big threat. And then we get the insane twist that Danny is Allison's brother. And Lloyd knew this and like knew he could be a threat. And then that's where everything all crazy happens. Lloyd sends the gators out, and then they have the Ricky, Strix, and Danny have to fight with the gators, and then Strix makes his sacrifice and gets eaten by all of the gators, and then Danny's all like left scarred, and like it's just an insane cliffhanger to set up the big final ending. Hoorah! And one thing about the last part I love so much is like you get a new version of Danny. He's given up. He knows Lloyd knows every step he's gonna make before he even makes it. And Ricky's kind of being that one to talk him back into being the fighter and like, hey, well, you didn't give up, so we're not gonna give up now. And like, I really love that dynamic. Ricky and Danny went from hating each other to being like great friends, to being brothers almost. And I love that dynamic between the two. And that ending scene with Danny dying and Ricky like being all emotional and they're like saying their goodbyes is a real beautiful ending for both of them. With the fight scene between Ricky and the gators, that was one that I had difficulty filming. One, because the wind was terrible, and two, it was dark and like, they both wore black and it was hard to see. And like, there were some shots that weren't used in the final cut that I do have. I might share those. And so, yeah, it was very difficult to film that scene, but very cool to see, Ricky, you know, take out 6 gators, some of which were off screen, some of which were on screen. But yeah, real cool scene. And then you get the big epic showdown, the big final scene where Danny invades Lloyd's mind in the afterlife and shows him visions of, like, you know, Allison and, like, their encounters, and, like, because he knows that Allison was the person that Lloyd feared the most. And so Lloyd is afraid, and then he realizes that Danny's there, and then he, like, just goes crazy, like, throws him wall to wall to wall, and then Danny sees the sword that he chopped Lloyd's heads off, and Lloyd notices this, and he's like, nope, you're not using that again on me this time, and then throws him to the wall, and then, like, chains him up, and he's like, you know, at first, I had hoped you and your sister would join me. And it's like, your sister was a much stronger opponent than you ever were. He's kind of mocking him, but also, like, you know, Allison was a much stronger opponent, like, telling the audience that, like, that was Lloyd's biggest rival, was Allison. And then Danny realized that he also has power in the afterlife too, and so he shows Lloyd more images of his past, and then sends him back to the real world. And this is Lloyd's first time back into the real world. And then Danny uses his powers to, like, melt Lloyd's skin off his hand, and then, like, you see his bone, and Lloyd is scared. He's afraid. Because he knows, like, this is, like, possibly his end. And then Danny uses all of his powers to melt Lloyd's skin and fur off of his face, and, like, he's just nothing but a pile of bones, and, like, his shirt falls down in his head, and you see his skull. And I knew that would be the last shot of this film, you know, kind of resembling Beast of Heaven 6 ending, where it ended with his decapitated head. Now it's ending with Lloyd's skull head, like, he's fully dead. And the interesting part about this is I knew if I was going to kill one character off, I knew both characters were going to have to die. It's just something that needed to be done, and I'm glad I did do that, because, you know, it showed that, you know, this is the final one. Nobody is safe. Not even the hero is safe. But it also shows that, you know, Lloyd is 100% dead. You know, he's a skeleton. He's nothing but a pile of bones. And I knew that was going to be the way to kill him. I knew, like, you know, that had to be the big way you kill him. And yeah, this is just a really beautiful ending, and it got me all emotional when I watched it for the first time when I was editing it, and it was just a great, beautiful ending to the series that I made years ago, all the way in 2019. And it was just amazing to do. And, you know, saying goodbye to these characters was something that was very emotional for me, because I spent about 6 years with these characters. It was a very beautiful ending, and I'm really glad, you know, each character got their time to shine, especially in this last film. You know, each character got their time to shine. And each character was different, you know. Each character was different. You know, Danny is the brains. He's a fighter. He is the smartest one of the group. He also has a little bit of fear to him, you know, as you saw at the beginning of Beast in the Cabin 8 Part 3. Lloyd is like the brute strength. He is the strongest. He's the most angry. He's the most vicious and crazy, and the brute strength that, like, is insane. And, like, his design really does change a lot in the series, and I love that. Ricky kind of starts off as this arrogant guy, but then he slowly, like, becomes a hero. You know, this one bad guy becomes this one good guy. Same with, like, most of the characters, all except for Lloyd, really, and Frankie, I guess. Yeah, but yeah, Ricky's progression really does shine. You know, each of the other characters, you know, Hairline, Strix, they all, like, are their own different. Like, Hairline, like I said in the first documentary I did, is the fastest. Strix is the one that, like, will also is like Danny, and he's, like, very smart. And the Gators are very vicious creatures. They're all different. Frankie is, like, the henchman, like, is the background. They're all different. And yeah, it was real cool. Hello, I'm Richard Payne.
I'm Riley Zinn.
So what did you think about working on the first film? What was your first impression of the film?
It's crazy.
What did you like about it?
Everything.
What did you think about the second film that we did in the hallway and that?
That was cool.
Did you like that?
Mhm.
And then what was your favorite part of that? Who did that? What did you like about the fourth film? We shot at my house.
I don't know.
I thought it was real fun.
Mhm.
I thought us collaborating was real fun.
Mhm.
Helped like better our friendship.
Mhm.
I think each film we tried to keep different and unique. And then there was one film that we did where I was the good guy and you were the bad guy,
Mhm.
but I still killed you. And I thought that was fun. I thought that was unique and different because it was a film that I did about my music, and it was different than anything we ever done. And I thought it was interesting. But what about, are you excited to film The Bone Man?
Mhm.
And in that movie, Riley gets kidnapped. And my character kind of is very evil and wicked but yeah, I thought it was a real fun experience getting to film with you and do all that. What do you think?
It's cool.
We collaborated good.
Maybe.
And yeah, it was a real fun. What is your favorite thing that you've done? Favorite role you've done?
I don't know.
What do you think is your favorite thing we've shot?
Probably everything. I don't know.
Yeah, that's basically it. Her character is often like a fighter, but always seem to get the upper hand in the end, and that's pretty much the gist of it. We had a great time shooting that. Yeah, that was lots of fun. Each rivalry was its own different, unique. You know, Tommy and Lloyd's rivalry, it didn't last long, I guess you could say. I mean, I guess you could say it lasted throughout the entire thing because every other person that Lloyd fight was related to Tommy in some way. So I guess you could say technically it lasted the longest. And you have Lloyd and Allison's rivalry, which lasted through Beast in the Cabin 2 through 4. And you have Danny and Lloyd's rivalry, which lasted through Beast in the Cabin 5, 6, 5 through 8. And it was, now me personally, I would say the best rivalry is Lloyd and Allison, but the most important one to the story is Danny and Lloyd's. But yeah, it was a real cool experiment getting to look at all the rivalries, and you got Dr. Payne and Danny too. I didn't even think about that. That too. It was real cool getting to look at all the rivalries, and that was really cool, and see where all the other ones, which ones are more important than others, and then all that. Now, in terms of what's next, there's not going to be a 9th film. We got The Bone Man. Me and Riley got The Bone Man coming out in June. And then after that, I don't know. I've got a few more films upcoming after that. You know, if Bone Man does good and Riley wants to do it, I'll do a sequel. And it's gonna be lots of fun. The Bone Man is gonna be lots of fun. That's kind of my main focus right now at the moment, is getting that film ready. I think me and Riley are gonna start filming in February, March, April, one of those. And yeah, it's gonna be lots of fun. Real great stuff coming your way. The final moments of the series, I knew the final shot of the film would be Lloyd's skull, and I knew Danny would die and Ricky would get emotional and he would be sad. And that's up to you what happens with Ricky. You know, I left that to for the audience to decide, what happens with Ricky after that? That's up to the audience. I didn't think about what happened with Ricky. That's up to the audience. You can decide what happens with him after this film. You can decide whether or not he dies. You can decide whether or not he goes out and does what Danny was always wanting to do, with protect the people. That's up to you all. But yeah, Lloyd's dead. The Gators are dead. Danny's dead. Strix is dead. Harlan, Frankie. Yeah, like the only one that's left alive is Ricky, which, I mean, to some of you, you could say he's dead, but you could say he's dead. You could say he's alive. That's like I said, that's up to you guys. There were a lot of different endings I had fun. Like I said, one ending involved Allison coming back and having Lloyd face off, and then there was one ending where like Danny would like use his sword and like cut the Lloyd's face, and like he would like start shaking, and he would go from fox to human, and then he would go to human, and then you'd almost see like a glimmer of light still trapped in him, and like Danny's trying to apologize for like everything that his family and he's done to Lloyd, and like Lloyd's like, I'm not your friend, and they're like, and Danny is like about to tear apart. He feels so terrible what happened with Lloyd, and Lloyd Danny's like, I won't leave you, not again. And Lloyd kind of gives like a little death stare, and then like he transforms back into a fox and is like, then you'll die just like your family. And then like they'll fight, and then they'll both die, like just by stabbing each other in the heart. And yeah, that was one. Then there's one where Danny and Lloyd's skin, like, both their skins melt off and they both die. There's one where Danny and Lloyd and Ricky, they all fight, and then they all three die. No one makes it out. There was one where Lloyd made it out. Just so many different endings. But I did really love this one. I loved settling on this one where both of them where only Ricky makes it out. And, because it's something you never expect. And I wanted to do something that people never expected. But this is the end. I want to thank everybody involved with the making of this series. I want to thank everybody I collaborated with. I want to thank all my friends and family. I want to thank my mom. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Riley. I want to thank all the people I collaborated with, everybody. Just thank you for making this series possible. But I'm Richard Payne, and I will see you all in June for the Bone Man. Peace out.